Hello, hello. This is Justin Colletti of SonicScoop. Thanks for joining me for this week's episode of the SonicScoop podcast. And today we are going to be talking about the lie of DIY. It is true, I believe, that very often DIY is a lie. In fact, there's a bunch of major lies we tell ourselves when it comes to doing DIY projects. I am going to rant against the idea of DIY, however unhip and unpopular that might be to do. But in the end, I will give you some ideas on when DIY actually makes sense, when you should do it. After I poo-poo all over DIY for, a good long chunk here, I'll give you a sense for when it makes sense. But to cut right to the chase, some of the biggest lies we tell ourselves about DIY are that we'll save money by doing a DIY project. We'll tell ourselves that we can't afford to do something other than DIY. Sometimes we'll feel like other people can't be trusted with our darlings. And sometimes we can feel like working with others could slow us down. And all of those, most of the time, are exactly the opposite of the truth. And if you are interested in doing any of those things better, you want to save more money, you want to make sure that you can afford it, you feel like you can't trust others with your darlings, and if you feel like you don't want to be bogged down and slowed down by the expectations of others, actually avoiding DIY and working with other people can improve all of those areas. The very reasons that people DIY are often completely backwards and completely against their own purposes. I'm going to share you a couple of stories today to help hammer this idea home, and we'll go over some general ideas as well. I wanted to share some things. There are a lot of people out there who've done DIY stuff and have come out the other end realizing the process was much different than they expected. Here's a Reddit thread I stumbled across today called, "It took me 17 years to finish my first speaker project." So this idea about the lie of DIY applies not only to making our own records all by ourselves, but also building our own gear and doing DIY projects when it comes to gear making. It took me 17 years to finish my first speaker project, and here it is. Cool. This guy started in 2007, and this has a lot of upvotes, probably because it resonated with a lot of people just how long it took to actually complete this project. So if your goal was to have really good, really cost-effective speakers to do work on in your studio, maybe DIY speakers aren't your best bet. Now, there are certain cases where it could be, and we'll talk about that too. But first, I'm going to talk about the vast majority of cases where you shouldn't have DIY envy because it's going to completely work at cross purposes, and this is one of them. Another thing, I'm not a big Reddit guy, but I was going through the Reddit today because I wanted to get people in their own words talking about the stress of DIY. And here's another one that really hit it for me. This guy was asking a while back on the audio engineering subreddit. He was asking mastering engineers, how long does it take to master a 4-track EP? And the top most upvoted answer was, mastering your own EP takes about 10 years. Mastering someone else's should take a couple of hours and maybe a few revisions. And I think this is extremely upvoted because of how resonant it is with people. And there's two ways in which mastering your own EP takes 10 years. The first way is all the second guessing and the backing and forthing that you're doing and how suboptimal it is to be mastering, quote unquote, something that you've already mixed. And we'll talk about why that is. But in addition to that, to get good at mastering probably takes about 10 years of experience in audio to be really good at mastering. I didn't start mastering until I was about a decade into doing audio professionally for an income. I was doing audio for an income, I want to say right around the 1 decade mark. That was my sole source of income. That's when I switched to mastering. And for me, learning mastering was relatively easy. I learned it in a day, at least the basic principles in a day. And it piggybacked on all this other stuff that I had learned from a decade of working in audio, the first 5 years of which, I don't want to say I'm ashamed of the work that I did, but it's nowhere near up to the snuff that I would expect out of a professional I'd be working with today. So if you want to get into recording, mixing, producing, because you're an artist, expect there to be something like a 5-year learning curve before you are reasonably good at it, to the extent where you're as good at it as some other, competent professional. Not an amazing one, but some other competent person. All these years that you're going to put into it. And this doesn't count all the studio gear you end up buying, all the time you end up studying music production and audio engineering and mixing and all of that stuff, when you could have been writing songs or working on performances or working on networking with other artists or playing more shows or doing the things that you want to do as an artist. So I think that DIY is a really bad idea whenever the allure of DIY takes you away from the things that you really should be doing, that takes you away from the things that you really want to be doing, that take you away from the actual day-to-day activities where your heart really is. And in the case of a guy taking 17 years to do a speaker project, was his heart really in it? Or is it at this point, is it 10 years in, it's like, oh man, I don't even know his full story. But there's a few different ways it could take you 17 years to finish a set of speakers. One is that you realized there's so many additional skills that you had to learn, and you shelved this project until you got all these other skills that would finally allow you to create these speakers to better ability. Another reason is because your heart wasn't so much in the project. It wasn't like a passion thing, an ongoing, like motivated, an ongoing thing that was aligned with your ultimate higher goals. And that working on the project took you away from your higher goals and instead of keeping you in line with your higher goals. That's one possible way that a speaker making project could take 17 years. And it's one of the possible reasons that you might be mixing your album for 2 years. So before I give you some more concrete ideas of how you can figure out when you should and when you shouldn't DIY, when it actually makes sense to do it, when it's actually going to be cost effective, I'm just going to shout out a couple things. One big thing I'm going to shout out is mixing breakthroughs. If you are super into mixing and you're like, you know what, I want to get good at mixing, this is important. And I realize that this is a journey that could take me 2 to 5 years before I feel really competent at it, but I want to speed that up. Mixing breakthroughs is the best thing I know for speeding that up. And you can speed it up substantially. People take this course and they have like leapfrog moments. Because what I do is in this course, you don't just watch me mix, although there's that option. You can watch me go through 5 different mixes in a variety of different genres. But it's about putting you in the driver's seat, you in the hot seat, giving you specific exercises that are going to completely change the way that you approach the mix and give you experience in trial and error, failing fast, getting good fast, almost little mixing games that you have to do in this course, that through task-based learning, improve your ability and your intuition around mixing. So I'm really going to recommend mixing breakthroughs, but I'm not going to recommend to everybody because some of you shouldn't be learning to mix better. Some of you should learn about mixing just enough so that you can really speak qualitatively about what you like or dislike, and maybe you can have better conversations about mixing and understand really what it's all about, what the parameters should be, what working with a professional should be like and feel like, what's possible in a mix. But a lot of you folks shouldn't be learning. And I also have the Mastering Demystified course. You can check that out if you want to learn everything that I know about mastering to master for yourself or others at a professional level. You can take Mastering Demystified, but it's not for everybody. There's a lot of you who shouldn't be mastering and shouldn't be learning mastering, particularly if you really want to mix or you really want to be an artist. Quick shout out and thanks to all of you who are joining us here for the live stream premiere. Lucas, Mike, Ryan, Chris, Benj, Simon, John, all of you folks, great to have you here. Remember to hit like and subscribe and hit that notifications bell. Make sure you don't miss any great new episodes when we come out with them. Also, big shout out and thanks to Sound Toys, making some of my favorite creative mixing effects in the known universe. Try out anything they make for free for 30 days over at soundtoys.com. Now, this is the point where some people are going to say, this is just 9 minutes of intro. When's he actually going to talk? No, this is it. This is what I want to tell you. Don't DIY. But for those of you who want more detail about when it's appropriate to do it and when it's not, let's do some thought experiments. So the big lie, number one, about DIY is that I'll save money by going the DIY route. And this is most of the time untrue. Let's take an example really quick of building your own speakers, which is something you could do, or building your own mic preamp. The occasions in which you will really save money are rare because of something very important that you might not have factored in called opportunity cost. This is doubly so for those of you who want to build speakers who haven't done carpentry in the past. Like to actually build speakers from scratch. And if you hear about, here's a $400 or $500 kit where you can buy, build $3,000 or $4,000 set of speakers, this assumes that you've already done lots of woodworking and you have like a table saw and a jig and like hundreds of dollars of woodworking tools, power tools, and a space to have those power tools in, and you're spending how much in additional like real estate costs per month to have this additional workspace? Because you're not going to be sawing through wood in your studio, getting sawdust everywhere. You need like some other environment to actually do this carpentry stuff. Or when it comes to making your own cables or building your own mic preamp, do you already have soldering skills? Do you need to buy a soldering kit? Do you need to now first start by practicing soldering, by making a whole bunch of cables before you jump straight into making your own preamp? But even if you do have all of those things already, you have this additional space that you're paying monthly costs towards, or you have all of these tools already because carpentry is already your hobby, great. You have thousands of dollars or at least hundreds of dollars worth of power tools and a space to put it all in. Are you factoring an opportunity cost? Because if you are a person who's intelligent enough and hardworking enough and productive enough that you can build your own three-way speakers or even fancier, nicer mastering speakers, you should probably be making at least $100,000 a year. If you live in a developed country, if you live in the United States in particular, like with that skill set, that if you could build a really nice set of speakers fairly quickly, like say in under a month, you should be making, I would say, about $100,000 a year. Or at least you have the skills, intelligence, and aptitude to do that. So now you need to think about what a person who's making $100,000 a year should be billing as an hourly rate. And you should be billing roughly $100 an hour if you're making $100,000 a year and you're an independent contractor, freelancer. Now you might say, well, I just did the math and if I do a 40-hour week, it looks more like it should be $50 an hour. No. You're making the mistake of confusing billable hours with non-billable hours. Like the hours that we're actually working and then we can bill people for, we need to charge double for those because all of our other hours during the day, we're like half of our hours during the day that we work, we're going to be paid $0 for. There's so much admin work that you're doing as an independent contractor, as a sole proprietor, as a business owner. There's so much of this unpaid back-end work that you're doing that doesn't get paid. So you need to bake into your hourly rate the opportunity cost of those hours that you're not getting paid for, that you have to do to actually keep your business moving and to keep the lights on. Like no one's paying you to network or prospect with new clients. No one's paying you to keep your studio tidy or do your books. No one's paying you to empty your own trash. There's all this stuff that you might be doing that you're not getting paid for. So if you're going to make $100,000 a year, you got to say every hour of my time doing like productive work where my brain is invested in it, I should be earning $100 in those hours. So if it takes you 20 hours to build a set of speakers, that's $2,000. And maybe if you're good, you already have some carpentry skills, you already have some soldering skills, you could spend 20 hours building a set of speakers and then you add your material costs and maybe you're in $2,500, $3,000 once you count your own labor, if you're really efficient at it. And you got speakers that you could have bought for $2,500 or $3,000. Similar in quality. Like it is very rare that you're going to be in a situation, even once you get good, that once you factor in your own reasonable labor cost, that you're actually saving money doing DIY. And you got to take the same idea of opportunity cost to hiring a mixing engineer, hiring a mastering engineer. You could spend the next 6 months mixing your album, and you could spend literally 20 hours per song. And then you have 10 songs and you've spent 200 hours on mixing. Now multiply 200 by 100. 200 by 10 would be 2,000. We're talking about like $20,000 of your time you have spent mixing your own album. when you possibly could have hired somebody good at maybe a rate of, I don't know, $500 per track, and they would have charged you $5,000. And $5,000 seems like a lot of money until you look at your opportunity cost of $20,000. Now, these are just some numbers I'm throwing out at you. Maybe you don't feel like you could ever make $100,000 a year. I think that's silly. Stop thinking that way. Stop thinking that way about yourself. Most adults who get to like the higher points in their career in today's day and age, with today's inflation and all of that, $1 today is worth a lot less than $1 in your parents' generation. So don't get fixed on what their incomes were or how much you made 20 years ago. Looking forward, even if you're in your 20s now, the kind of income that you're capable of making right now is not necessarily the kind of income that you're going to be capable of making in your 30s and 40s and 50s. So that's one thing to think about. But even if your time is valued at so much less, and you say, Justin, opportunity cost, fine, I got reasonably, I know these days I'm worth $20,000 or $30,000 a year. I have so little experience. And wouldn't DIY be a good way to build this experience and build some skills that you can use? In that case, then absolutely. If you have more time than money, there are absolutely cases in which DIY can help you build skills and you don't really have the same opportunity cost. But with that said, what would be better for the career path that you want to go down? Would it be learning the skills of carpentry and electronics, in which case it might be? Let's say you're really into audio. I have a friend who I knew back in the day. He actually has a popular YouTube channel these days. His name is Louis Rossman. And apparently, he has this huge YouTube channel these days. I knew him from back in the day on the Tape Op message board. And he has this huge channel these days where he talks about consumer, not quite consumer protection, but like the right to repair, all this kind of stuff. Well, Louis, when I knew him from the Tape Op message boards, he was the kind of guy who was building his own speaker systems because he thought they were super cool. And he built like a mastering grade system that could have cost in the tens of thousands of dollars. And here he was in his early 20s, and maybe he shelled out in the low thousands of dollars in materials and all this stuff to build speakers that would have cost in the 5 figures, $20,000 or something like that. And at the amount he was earning back then made a ton of sense to do. And it did make sense for what he ultimately ended up doing with his life. And what he ultimately ended up doing with his life is he started a bunch of stores that repaired iPhones. So this was a guy who was a recording studio assistant. He interned at Avatar Studios. And one of the things he said to me, Justin, I interned at Avatar, one of the fanciest, nicest studios. Some of you might know it by the name Power Station. New York City, one of the top studios there. And everyone there was miserable. And I said to myself, I don't want to be part of the studio world. So he took the skills that he taught himself by building stuff to start an iPhone repair shop on like 14th Street in New York City, where people drunk the night before would drop their iPhones in the toilet or on the cement floor or something like that. And he had a never-ending stream of business of people bringing him cracked iPhones, and he would repair their screens. Now, Louis, he was so bad at marketing that he literally blatantly insulted his customers, and they would come back to him. His mascot for his first company was a sheep. And I said, what's with the sheep mascot? He said, oh, the reason I have a sheep mascot for my iPhone repair company is I think all these people buying iPhones are like sheep because they could just have an Android. It's so much cheaper and it's a better device. Yet here they are like cult followers buying iPhones for so much more money and they're less good devices. He went into a market where there was so much demand that he could literally like make fun of his customers with his mascot, look down on them, and still make a bigger killing than he ever did in the studio world. And I think he's doing quite well for himself these days. And he ended up training other people to do the repairs and then oversaw, I think, a number of stores. And I don't know Louis's whole story. I'm probably botching a bunch of it. The last time I saw him, we were both in our 20s. And I found him because I needed my iPhone repaired. And I went out of my way to see Louis to get my iPhone repaired by him because I want to talk to him. I remember him being one of my favorite people on the Tape Op message board back in the day when message boards were a thing. But here's the thing. This has been story time hour for a while. What does it have to do with mixing or mastering? He got into DIY speaker design, and it gave him great skills, but not the skills of making records and going into music production, not the skills of being an artist or a musician. And there's nothing wrong with it. And I believe wholeheartedly that Lewis is more happy doing the kind of thing he's doing today than he would have been if he went down the studio path. He thought the people in the studio world to him seemed miserable. Or at least he probably would have been miserable doing it. So, for you, be careful on what you DIY. If really your main passion, your main interest is to be a musician, to be an artist, to be a producer, to be an engineer, then these DIY projects that take you more away from that are not necessarily to your benefit. That said, if you have music as a side passion, and honestly, music is one of those things where you're like, ultimately, the best music I'm ever going to listen to is music made by other people. I'm not really competing with them. Music for me is fun, but it's enough of like a springboard that it can give me the inspiration to do other DIY projects that are related to music and fun that'll give me other skills that I can bring to other things. Like Lewis's skills that he developed reading schematics and working with soldering irons translated to fixing iPhones. But be careful if you really want to be a musician or in the music world about hobbies that take you too far away from it or that pull you in a completely different direction. There's a caveat to that too that we'll get to a little later on. So the other lie that we tell ourselves is we cannot afford to do DIY. This is the big lie number 2. The first lie is that I'll save money. Often untrue once you factor in especially opportunity cost. And especially true if you don't already have like the infrastructure and the background skills to do the task you want to do. But lie number 2 is that I can't afford. I'd rather not DIY. I'd rather work with really capable, skilled people, but I can't afford to. And there I say, nonsense. Stop telling yourself that. Stop thinking that way. Instead, ask yourself, how can I afford it? I'm not the biggest Robert Kiyosaki fan in the world, although I read his a couple of his major books, and I think that was one of my big takeaways from him was that idea. This is the rich dad, poor dad guy. I think one of the good ideas he had, a really good idea that has stuck with me over the years, is that poor people say to themselves, I can't afford it. Rich people say to themselves, how can I afford it? Forget this poor, rich distinction. Don't care about it. This is what I care about. You'll be a much more effective person if instead of thinking, I can't afford that thing I really want, say to yourself, if I really want that thing, how would I afford it? What would I have to do? And then you can come up with one of 2 conclusions. The things that you'd have to do to afford it aren't worth it to you, which means you actually don't really want that thing. And you can stop being jealous or envious or have your heart attached to this thing that you'll never have. And you can put it to bed and be a much more whole and confident and happy person by putting to bed some fantasy of having something that you ultimately won't have because you don't really want it that much. Or you can say to yourself, okay, here's what I'd really have to do. If I wanted help on the mixing side of things, or I wanted help of a great producer or a great co-writer or whatever it might be, what would I have to do to be able to afford it? That's a better question to ask. The other thing I'll say is that so many of us say to ourselves, oh, I can't afford to work with someone really good, so I have to do it by myself. And then what do? We spend thousands, and in some cases, tens of thousands of dollars on audio gear. I can't afford a mixing engineer, you say, as you shell out $5,000 on a new set of speakers, or even if it's $1,500 on a new set of speakers, or even if it's $500 on a new set of speakers, I can't afford to collaborate with someone who's really good, who's going to help me in my path, but I just bought a $500 set of speakers, or a $5,000 set of speakers, or a $2,000 compressor, or I blew another $1,000 in plugins this year. And just having had help on like literally one song in the whole year would have done more for your entire career or your entire forward progress as an artist, even if it's as a hobby. Just like one even coaching session with a great mixer where you don't even pay their full mixing rate and you just say, hey, let me play you my mix. Like, what would you change about this? What do you think needs to be done differently? What have I got right? What have I gone wrong? I got to tell you, I do coaching calls with people sometimes. This isn't just me plugging my own coaching calls. Honestly, I do them cheaper than I should just because I love doing them with people. And I do them at slightly lower than my actual hourly rate because they're so much fun. But when I get in a coaching call with people, people often say like, oh my goodness, that's like the best money I've spent all year. Like I've spent thousands of dollars on plugins or treatment or speakers or whatever. And just having you listen to my stuff with me and give me an honest appraisal on like specific things I could address. What am I doing well and what can I be doing better? Like I'm telling myself that I can't afford that because of the sticker shock of the hourly rate. Like, yeah, my hourly rate normally is more expensive than some plugins you're going to buy, right? But so many people who've done it are like, I'm glad I did that instead of buying a plugin. Because like just having this one-on-one session has changed the way that I hear what I'm doing and I hear other work and I think about the process for months or years going out into the future. So we tell ourselves that we can't afford to collaborate with people who are skilled, but then we spend more money on things that will have less return for us. It's crazy. It's nonsense. It's insane. But we do it anyway. I've done it. I will continue to do it. Another lie we tell ourselves is that others can't be trusted with our darlings. And this is actually one of the things that rings a little bit true for a lot of people who end up being producers and engineers. They remember being an artist and working with someone, and the process made them feel awful, made them feel miserable. There are so many producers and engineers of my generation, and particularly people who are about 10 years older than me. Whenever I would interview people about 10 years older than me and ask them, how did you get into music production and audio engineering? So many of that generation was different than my story. The story of my generation, I'm 43 years old, even though there's so much white in this beard that I probably look like 55 years old right now. Once I shave it, hopefully I'll look like 30 again. But I'm 43. And for people in my generation, right around the age I am, a few years older, a few years younger, a lot of them started with like a 4-track cassette thing. And that's what got them into music production and audio engineering. And they loved the process of recording their own songs. They thought that was so cool and so much fun. It was almost more interesting than actually writing songs for them at a certain point. So they went more down the technical route. But for people a little bit older than me, they often had a different experience. People who are today maybe in their late 50s, early 60s, so many of these guys, I said, how do you become producer, engineer? They would say, I was in a band. We went to a recording studio and I hated it. I hated the way the annoying audio engineer treated us, looked down on us, talked to us. I hated the way the record came back to me sounding through the speakers. There was something about the experience that was so awful. I felt betrayed somehow. And whether, maybe part of that was true. Maybe they did deal with an audio engineer who had poor social skills, which was very much the case. Like most audio engineers were known for having poor social skills 20 years ago and 30 years ago and 40 years ago. Today, you have to have better social skills as an audio engineer because audio engineers now are like a dime a dozen. People know how to work a DAW and make the stuff work. You throw a rock and you'll hit one, look like, oh, why'd you throw a rock at me? So today they have better social skills, but back then, oh man, there was like a stereotype and a fairly accurate one of like the curmudgeonly, holier-than-thou audio engineer. They do somewhat exist to this day as well. Maybe there's some YouTube personalities for you who fit that bill. Hopefully I'm not one of them. Maybe I am. I don't know. But anyway, I digress. And if you don't like digressions, you should be listening to someone else's podcast because that's what happens on the SonicScoop podcast. So many of them would say, I remember my friend Jeff Sanoff, he wrote for SonicScoop for a while. Eli Janney, another friend of mine, I think he plays keyboards for The Tonight Show now. Those guys worked on some great big records. They wrote for SonicScoop. Actually, the first podcast for SonicScoop was a podcast with those two guys as hosts. It was called the Input Output Podcast. Hopefully episodes of it are still available somewhere. Really fun podcast. I produced that podcast back when it was those guys. And both of those guys told me the same story. We went to the studio, it was miserable. And I knew that I had to become an audio engineer, music producer, so that other people wouldn't have such a miserable experience in the studio. So that there could be like cool people working on records and no one would ever have to feel that way again. So there is this ring of truth in the others can't be trusted with our darlings kind of thing. But this just comes down to vetting the people you're working with. And being somewhat slow to hire or at least fast to fire when a project isn't going right. Like, you don't need to have undying loyalty to people who you've just started working with. Work with people you can give the benefit of the doubt to. But when you find someone who's like a good fit to work on projects with, they become really a friend, a confidant, like someone who understands you, someone who genuinely cares about what's happening to you. And all of a sudden, there's someone that's in your corner. And to a degree, it's actually you that can't be trusted with your darlings. There's this saying for people who want to become writers that one of the hardest things about writing is that you have to murder your darlings. This means a few different things. If you create characters in a story, first of all, bad things are going to have to happen to the people in the story, or else it can be a very boring story. So you've got to create knowable, likable, relatable people, and then make awful things happen to them. One of the greatest directors for this, I know the director, David Cronenberg, he is so great at setting up the first 10 or 20 minutes in a movie and making the main characters so likable. Whether it's The Fly or History of Violence or really any Cronenberg movie, you just like really end up like liking these people. They become your friends. And the beginning of the movie is almost always just like a nice experience. And then he does horrible things to his characters and puts them in the worst possible situations, and their lives unravel. So they're an emotional roller coaster. So one, you have to be willing to do that, but also murder your darlings means something else. It means you have to write more than you think you need, put out so many ideas that you think are good, and then throw a whole lot of them away because most of them aren't good enough. So can you be trusted with your darlings to murder your darlings? Because sometimes when we're in the studio with that curmudgeonly audio engineer who makes us hate, being in the studio, sometimes it is the case that that person's a curmudgeon. Also, sometimes it's the case that actually, no, you need more experience working with other people and taking constructive criticism. And you also need better social skills, and you need more practice working with other people, and that you're bringing the worst out of others. That's sometimes what's going on. I know it's been the case for me. And this is related to the lie number 4, which is that working with others slow us down. Oh, really? This is the most backwards one of all. I don't want to work with others because I don't want to be on someone else's timetable. I don't have to wait for other people. I can't get down to doing the work unless this other person is available. I get it. There are ways in which working with others you feel like could slow you down. And maybe there's a nugget of truth to this. There's a nugget of truth to all these things. But what really slows you down is lack of accountability. If you have no one else in your artistic life, if there's no one else that you're collaborating with, that's going to slow you down because you're not accountable to anybody. So I'm going to encourage you to work with others so that you can be accountable to them. It's so much more likely that your projects will finish on time and that you don't dwell on them forever if other people are counting on you, or other people are expecting things from you, and other people are working from you, or working with you. So that's the other big lie that I wanted to talk about. Now, I got to tell you, I still make these mistakes all the time. I'm way too DIY about some things. There's so many things that I should delegate that I don't. For instance, my picture is not very good. I have like the worst video shot on Pro Audio YouTube, and I should totally get more help and bring people in to help me with color correction and like framing shots properly and all this stuff. Like everyone and their mother has a better shot than me on YouTube. This isn't even my worst shot. I have, just the other week, it was totally like washed out. Something changed in my color correction settings. I don't know. I'm an audio guy. I don't do lights. And to tell you the truth, here's an aside, I'm suspicious of audio people who have good lighting and good camera work. I feel like they must not know audio. So think about that. The next time you see like an audio guy with a really good video shot, that's time he's not spending on audio. So I'm very suspicious. But maybe some of these people are doing the right thing and getting help, which I absolutely should do. And I should absolutely spend more time on having a better video shot. There's so many things that I could do in my business better if I delegated more and I worked with others even more than I do. So this is something we all have to catch ourselves in. Ultimately, I think DIY can be a lot of fun. It can be a great educational process. For example, real quick, I've been taking, maybe I should have set up an affiliate link for this, but if you guys know the great courses, there's this guy named Stephen J. Ressler, I think is his name. And I just did his whole, I did his Understanding the Marvels of Medieval Technology. That one was really good. Understanding the World's Greatest Directors. Do-it-yourself engineering. I recently took this entire course. My daughter watched it with me. She's 7. It's like a college level engineering course. It's like a practical engineering course. And you build model airplanes and model helicopters, and you make a boat that actually works to have cement. There's like a rocket project in there and a blimp project. So much cool stuff. I have done exactly 0 of the projects that I learned about, but just learning about how to do the projects gave me so much of a better understanding of physics, and gave me a reason to revisit math that I haven't looked at since I was in high school, like trigonometry and, keeping my algebra skills up to snuff and all that. And it's really fun. And I could see as a hobby building any of those things. And as a hobby, potentially, if I was into woodworking, building speakers, if I really liked circuits, as a hobby, building a preamp, not because I think I'm saving money or that others can't be trusted to do good designs, but just because it's fun. So you should do DIY stuff if it's A, fun, or B, helps you build skills that are going to be useful to you in the future in a professional category. And it should either be advancing your career aspirations somehow, your work aspirations somehow, or it should just be a fun diversion from the other stuff that you normally do. Now, with that said, I kind of in this day and age almost don't encourage audio engineers and music producers and people like that to have a hobby that's too related to what they do. There's a pro and con here. If your main thrust career-wise is music production, your hobby could be building preamps and microphones and stuff like that. But I find that people who end up going down that rabbit hole, I should say, end up just moving in that direction. And they go from being producer engineering people to engineering people who actually are designing circuits and repairing stuff and supporting people or working in gear manufacturing companies. And they end up going down that path because it's so closely related to what they're into. I have found that for myself, the thing that helps me keep more focused in music production career-wise is to have hobbies that are totally useless and have nothing to do with music production. So for instance, my biggest hobby that's for the past 7 years now has been jiu-jitsu, which I absolutely love doing. It has nothing to do with music production or audio engineering. That escape from thinking about music and audio is extremely helpful to me. Other hobbies I've done have been archery, fencing. I like some of this competitive-y, combat-y stuff because I see music as so non-competitive. I see it as so collaborative. But that competitive part of me, I like to work it out there. Chess is another thing. Again, slightly competitive. But when you look at me like having a YouTube channel or trying to be a mastering engineer, I'm a platinum selling mastering engineer. I have a relatively successful YouTube channel and I teach people stuff. I'm so non-competitive in those areas. Like I don't care about beating the other guys. I have other places where I beat the other guys. And I just think about what's sensible for my life and my happiness and my family and my creativity when it comes to my actual work. You might end up with a totally different balance. And it's okay if you abandon being a musician, being a producer, being an engineer, and going down some other path that one of your DIY projects ended up turning into a career. And now you've become so good at carpentry that now you're in the career of building or rehabbing houses. Or you got so into electrical engineering that now you work for some gear company. Or maybe you do something completely different and mechanical or electrical as your main job, and audio was the jumping off point to learn those skills. I would say do DIY projects, not because they're going to save you money, not because other people can't be trusted, not because you can't afford to do otherwise, but because they're either A, really fun for you, or B, develop skills that will move you forward. And if what you want to move forward in is mixing, producing, engineering, then take some of that DIY effort, put it into a course like mixing breakthroughs, mastering demystified, compression breakthroughs, EQ breakthroughs. Put it into developing your network. Put it out there into going out and finding clients. Put it out there into doing practice sessions and mixing practice sessions. Put it out there into writing more songs, into doing more live performances and finding more people to collaborate with. The stuff that's actually going to move forward your either career or passion or hobby as musician, artist, producer, or engineer. I hope this one has been useful for you. John Sand says, hey, the sound is jumping out. Let me know if you guys have also had issues with that. I will definitely look into sound issues if any of you guys have been having problems with that stuff. Just reading through a couple quick comments here. Ryan Huggins says, DIY is great for gear nerds and analog enthusiasts who are interested in electrical engineering. As for real productivity, absolutely not. I am 100% with you, Ryan. Lucas, his off topic, he says he uses a pirated piece of software, and I'm going to scold you for that. I am very anti-piracy here because I respect and appreciate people and what they do. Ryan also says, building compressors and EQ is fun. I think of it as more of a hobby than as an efficient investment. But if you're low on money and have lots of time and you want to use analog gear, then why not, especially if you're a whippersnapper. Ryan couldn't have said it better myself. Lucas says, one of the upsides of being poor is that you have less opportunities to do this dumb stuff. All right, I dig it. Laid Back Sound says, the beauty of being poor is you can only become richer. Man, that's a fantastic attitude. Cold Acre says some really great points here. It's important to have a mentor or a better set of ears to run songs by. Absolutely, man. Nothing will improve the way that you work better than actually A, doing the work, and then B, collaborating with other people. If you can only do one of the two, the actually doing the work is the more important. But if there's one thing that you can add on to that, then it's the working with people who you know, like, respect, and trust in your field. Social Club Sound says, I ended up building studio monitors and it made me a better engineer. In what capacity? In the actual engineering capacity? I 100% believe you. Did it make you better at recording or mixing? And then if so, tell me how and why. And would it have made you better at recording and mixing than spending the same number of hours in dedicated, deliberate practice of recording or mixing, or taking a course in recording or mixing or something like that? So it's a question that I'd throw out there. Life in the Caribbean says, my hobby is gymnastics. Great. This is one of the other things I want to suggest to you guys is sometimes as audio people, we spend all day indoors, in dark rooms, hunched over computers, not moving our full bodies. And I'm going to say one of the other reasons that I've liked things like jiu-jitsu, archery, fencing, etc., weightlifting as hobbies, cycling, is that I'm not in front of my computer inside or hunched over some workstation. And if all of your hobbies have you doing the same kind of hunched over, stuck inside, not exercising your body kind of thing, man, you already do enough of that with your regular job or hobby. Shouldn't you have something that takes you out of that? It's one of my thoughts. I love that idea of having a hobby as gymnastics. Few adults do, but I've done adults gymnastic classes, tons of fun. Getting on the rings, rolling, tumbling, all that stuff's awesome. Also, if you have trouble with the drugs, as lots of people in music do, doing physical things with your body, it's like doing the drugs, but without the negative repercussions of the drugs. Trust me, I know this from experience. Social Club Sound says, I'm using the ones that I built, and then he lists them, and he says it's like if the Amphions had a baby with the Ex Machinas. Beautiful. I actually have the Ex Machinas, the Pulsars. They're great speakers. Isomatic says, my competitive hobby is speed running video games like Mario 64. Awesome. That's totally cool. I have a fantasy. I was watching a video the other day about people speed running Mike Tyson's Punch-Out, which is one of those games that I'm very proud I can beat. If you're a good drummer, Mike Tyson's Punch-Out, man, that is such a musical game because it's so rhythmic. It's all about timing. Beautiful game, Mike Tyson's Punch-Out. And I got to tell you, it also gets me a little physical. I kind of put my whole body into it. But I'd also encourage you to have a hobby that you do with your entire body and not just with your eyes and your hands. Laid Back Sound says, really good points here. And Maddie Two Hat says, yoga and lifting weights are my side hobbies. Great ones to have. Anything where you can have progression in. And this is another great thing about jiu-jitsu, powerlifting, something like gymnastics or yoga, things where you can feel forward progress over time. Because sometimes when it comes to being an artist, or sometimes when it comes to a career in music production or mixing or things like that, you cannot see measurable progress in what you're doing. How do you know that you're getting better at mixing when the different projects of different quality are coming at you. Like, are you improving? Are you getting worse? Sometimes you can't tell and you don't know. And having some things in your life where you can really see forward progress over time, slowly. And you can see the ups and downs in progress, because no one progresses in lifting in a straight line for a very long period of time. If you want to get stronger, you want to get in a barbell lifting program, you start by like a 5x5 thing with barbells. Well, a great way to get started adding muscular mass to your body. If you want to do that, you can progress in a linear way for a short period of time, and then that stops, and then it becomes nonlinear, and there's this up and down to improving. There are little troughs and peaks, and seeing that happen in your life is extremely useful and can remind you of just how much of a long haul getting good in music is. Social Club says that building speakers made him much quicker at identifying what you're hearing by frequency range, which in turn let me know where to reach out and make adjustments. Now, here's something I will say is that having better speakers, and for me, having speakers with better transient response, is extremely useful in, like, the more you can listen on good speakers, the more you can potentially understand sound better. That said, I think there are really fast, quick, and easy ways to learn frequency ranges. I think one of the best ways to do this is check out my full-length course, EQ Breakthroughs. The whole beginning of it is a whole bunch of guided listening exercises that will start to allow you to hone in on specific frequency ranges, make first guesses that are better, and final guesses with more confidence. But yeah, interesting. Isomatic says, yep, I ride my bike outside almost daily or just walk around and enjoy nature or do yard work. I love being outside more than anything. Yeah, sometimes a great thing to do when you work on music all the time is just take walks with either silence or like podcasts. That's something I did a lot of when I lived in New York City. Maddie Two Hat said 5x5 is awesome. Definitely a great way to get started in strength training, just like an empty bar if you've never done it before. And you'll find out that most people who can actually lift very heavy weights turn out to be extremely intelligent. Otherwise, they'd never get there. Laidback Sound says, I'm an IT engineer who has mixing as a passion, a nightmare combo for eyes and blood circulation. Yes, I hope you mix it up with some other stuff. Maddie Two Hat says, get a good fire pit. That will get you off screens. Oh man, great idea. Watching a fire is like way more entertaining than television. It's amazing. Like it seems to develop a plot somehow when you're watching an actual fire go. It's like, oh, did you see that one pop? Man. Watching small children is the same way. If you ever have kids or have family members who have kids, like just watching a toddler, it's like watching a fire, and it's better than watching television. It's also like watching a fire because it could destroy something. Mike Heapson recommends walking the dog multiple times, great for ear breaks. Oh, so important, getting distance from the work that we're doing, and having a dog will force you to do that. Here's the last one I'll read. Sibo says, I 100% agree with this philosophy of having physical hobbies to supplement sedentary creative work. Mine are Thai boxing, MMA, weighted calisthenics, and cycling. Awesome. Love it. Definitely support that stuff. I'm not saying don't do DIY, but make sure that you're also taking care of your own body if you're going to have DIY projects, because if that's something that's left on the back burner, I don't think it's good for your longevity as a person or in the arts. Well, thanks so much for hanging out with me. It's been Justin Colletti of SonicScoop. This was a long, ranty, rambly episode, but I hope you dug it, and I'll talk to you guys next time.